Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the land of Oz. My name is Dorothy. Well, not really. But you're going to go with me on this one, right? I want to take you on a journey down the yellow brick road to the community of child and youth care. I'm just going to be telling you stories of a journey because I think it's really, really important that we talk about, that we share our stories, but we also talk about how we find the balance between our head and our heart, and to really have the courage to care. Okay, I don't know why that's on, but I'm going to move out of the way, right? I've got one on here because my friend's recording me. Can you guys hear me all right? No. Okay, Sean, they can't hear me. Really? Ew. Okay. I wasn't really hoping I was hoping I didn't have to use this, but is this good enough? Yeah? Okay, because this would probably really scare you, wouldn't it?
I'm hearing in here, it's a little up.
A little up?
Yeah, there.
Okay, maybe I'll just tuck it in and we'll just go from there. Okay, so one of my friends and mentors in this field, Lorraine Fox, who unfortunately couldn't be here with us this week, years ago wrote a wonderful article called Who Put the Care in Child and Youth Care. If you haven't read it, I would strongly suggest that you do, because I think it reminds us of why we do what we do, right? So there's many ways that you could say, I care, loving gestures and all of those things, but really she talks about the fact that it's one thing to care, it's another thing to know what we're doing, right? So I have a couple of excerpts from her article that I want to read. So people have thought that because they were children, caring for them was something that just came to us. Well, it doesn't just come to us. It's work, hard work, and that's why we're professionals. Because these are the type of kids that ordinarily, if I saw them playing in my backyard, I'd tell them to go play in their own yard. I wouldn't want them in my yard. I wouldn't particularly want them playing with my kids. So why do I give my life to caring for them? Because that's my profession. That's what I chose, also what you chose. So I think that one of the things we need to do to enhance ourselves professionally is to stop saying, I work with kids, and let people know that you care for very troubled youngsters whom nobody else will care for. If somebody else cared, they wouldn't be in your face, right? So if we think about the kids that we care for, the idea of feeding them and clothing them is so removed from what they really need from us, right? We don't even think about it. We just go and we do and we give them what they need. But if you think about providing them with what they need professional care. They need us to understand the depth of where these kids come from. Professional care demands that we find the balance of our heart, our head, and have the courage to care. Now, a lot of times when we talk about beliefs, values, ethics, right? Thoughts, feelings, action. That's what this is. Only I had to put the heart first because I really believe that that's what brought you here. That's what brings us to this profession, is the fact that we all have a heart, right? And that's very true. And so I brought my 3 friends along with me to help guide me along this journey. The Tin Man, the Scarecrow, and of course, the lion, right? But it's really important, I think, that we start with the heart. But this is what, never mind, I'm going a little too fast for my slides, right? And there's not very many of them. But when we talk about the heart, it's all about valuing our differences, respecting other people, right? Communicating and caring with empathy and compassion. So we all came with empathy and compassion. And we thought, okay, there's something wrong here. There's something happening for some of these kids that isn't right, and so we're going to fix it. Any of you ever thought that way? Going to fix it, change it, make the world a better place? That's what I think. Well, I know that was my goal. I'm going to change the world and make the world a better place for every single kid that I run into. Not. Doesn't happen that way. You know it doesn't happen that way. But you still have to understand that everything, I believe, everything that drives us comes from here, comes from our passion, okay? But this is what the wizard says. The wizard says hearts will never be practical until they become breakable. And this is what Lorraine says. Ours is a profession that demands personal involvement. I can bake cookies without hurting. I can even fix my car without hurting. We can't care for these kids without hurting, and if we don't hurt, we don't care. So we have an emotional profession. Beyond getting paid to feel, however, we also get paid to act and behave in certain ways. A good CYC can't just walk around feeling all day, but that's where we start, with the heart. So I'm going to talk about my journey and how it started with the heart. So the journey on this yellow brick road started in the streets of downtown Calgary, Victoria Park, early 70s. This was a place that had the highest crime rate in the city, and it was a place you didn't go, okay? Because it was scary. Kids were walking around the streets carrying knives and guns and hurting each other and beating up each other, and oh my God, and the kids were sniffing everything they could find. Bay rum, you ever heard of bay rum? That was a long time ago, but I went, what the hell is bay rum? Okay, so I come from a family, middle-class family, wonderful parents who worked hard, loved their kids. So what the hell did I know about this other world? I didn't know anything about this other world. But while I was in university, I worked a lot of programs in communities, and I saw things that hurt me. I saw things that I went, there's something wrong with this picture. These kids are bruised. They're hungry. What's going on, right? And I think when we live in loving families, we're very sheltered and don't have a lot of awareness of what goes on around us, right? Well, I was to learn very quickly what goes on around us. My job was to do something with these kids. And I didn't really know what that meant, but I started to drop in. The job was to work in this community center and get the kids off the street and help them with whatever was happening for them, right? So a rude awakening when the first day a couple kids came up to me and went, "So you're the new thing." I went, "Okay, I'll be the new thing." Not sure what that thing was, but I'll be the new thing. Because what had happened is all the volunteers who had worked with these kids who were non-traditional in the way they worked and all became my best friends were all fired, right? Because they were doing things that people thought, well, you can't really do that. And they said, yeah, we need to get into their homes, we need to build relationships with these people so that and we need to understand where they're coming from before we can do anything, right? So I started working with these kids, and this is what I saw. I saw kids who were getting into trouble with the law and having so many things in their lives, but the only thing the reason they were getting in trouble with the law was so somebody would pay attention to them, right? Because otherwise, they were just getting lost in the abuse and the neglect and all of the things that were happening to them, and they're on the street and they're sniffing glue and they're having sex to get into the I don't know if some of you are from Calgary, so you might remember Friday night wrestling, right? But it was the place everybody went on Friday nights down the Stampede grounds, and literally kids were having sex to get into the wrestling, and they were doing all kinds of horrible things. So, but what I saw was incredible resilience with these kids, and I'll tell you about one girl in particular. She invited me to her home, for dinner. She wanted to cook me dinner. And since that time, I have seen a lot of bad places and a lot of horrible situations that kids live in, but this was my first experience to absolute filth. And I'm not sure why a lot of these people have pets, and they don't clean up their pets, and so the homes smell bad, right? And this young lady brought me home to cook me a spaghetti dinner, right? Never been in a kitchen that I don't think anything had ever been painted. The bedrooms, she had 5 siblings. The bedrooms were, literally beds stacked up on top of each other. No dressers, no nothing. And I was really not sure where I could sit that it was safe, right? But she was, I want you to see where I live, because this is my place. And her and I became quite close. And she talked about, I'm bringing you here so I can tell you that I'm not going to live like this in my life. I'm going to make it different. And she did. And so did a lot of other kids who came from that community, because they had spunk, right? And I'm thinking, these are amazing kids who live like this, who don't know if they're going to end up getting punched in the head when they walk through the door, or if they're going to have any food to eat. We all know this, right? So I thought, and you know what they did? I started a homework club, and these kids would come to me after school and do their homework because they wanted to learn, and they couldn't do it at home because there was nobody there helping them, right? And I thought, oh my God. So they needed a safe place, and that's where the dream started, right? I'm going to build them a safe place. How hard could that be? It's easy. Just get a house, furnish it, and you build it, and they will come. Well, it was a process to make that happen, okay? But one of the things that I knew, and believe me, there were kids there that stole from me and did all kinds of things because I was a real vulnerable 22-year-old, right? And I just loved them all. And they took advantage of me. And that was okay, though, because it's part of the process to learn where you find that balance. I knew that I wasn't equipped to open my dream home yet, so I went to BC because I heard about this treatment camp, and I use the word treatment very lightly. What was happening in British Columbia in the early 70s was that really tough kids were being housed in camps all around the province. To me, it sort of seemed like out of sight, out of mind. And these were tough kids. Some of these kids did go on to commit murder and do some other horrible things because they got lost out there. I went to this camp and I thought, there's something wrong with this place. Okay, so have you ever gone somewhere and just had this feeling that this isn't right, that we need to do things a little differently than what's being done? You ever challenged people on the way they work with kids? God, I hope so, right? Because we got to make sure we always challenge, right? And so what I learned there was everything you don't do to work with these types of really vulnerable, horribly abused kids. And the worst thing about it, absolutely no trust. Everything was locked up. And all the messages to these kids was, don't do that, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. So does it surprise you at all that they did everything they weren't supposed to do because somebody was telling them they couldn't do it, right? You gotta imagine this place on the Okanagan Lake. So here's the lake, here's their cabins, and here's this beautiful orchard behind us. They had a school there, and in the middle of the orchard was this amazing house. So it must have been the original home of the orchard owners. So, the big veranda, huge room in the back with a beautiful big stone fireplace, absolutely filthy. Broken down ping pong table over here, dirt on the floor. These kids all smoked, cigarette butts, whatever, and a TV locked up in the corner and a broken down couch. This was their rec room. I'm like, really? So they went to school in the day. They had school board teachers coming in. So we really had no work to do from 9 to 3. We got them up, we got them ready for school, and then the teachers took over. So I asked if I could have some paint and some equipment, and they went, why? I said, because I want to clean this room up. Why? Because it's a dump. Yeah. I said, these kids don't deserve this. Let's clean it up. So they thought I was crazy, but I was bored and needed something to do. So I started cleaning it up every day for a week. Those kids came, because they would come out of school and go to their cabins, and they'd come by and they'd go, what are you doing? I'm going, painting. Oh, why? This place is a dump. Yeah. So what? Said, you deserve better. And each day, and then more of them would come, and there were about 18 kids who lived in this place, and they'd come, and then they'd stop, and then they'd go. And it took about 4 or 5 days. And then finally one of them said, can I help? I say, absolutely. And before you knew it, they were all there, painting, cleaning. We cleaned out the fireplace. We cut wood. You know what I found at the back of this house? A huge, huge room full of art supplies, all locked up. So I got him out. This one native boy started painting pictures. Unbelievable. Because these kids are artistic. They have talents, but if we don't trust them to build that relationship so that they can show us, the other people who ran the camp were blown away. We went and got some secondhand furniture. They made their own ashtrays, and they controlled the room. And you did not butt a cigarette on that floor, right? And we built fires, and we fixed the ping pong table, and we played games. And we had fun. And I was thinking about this yesterday, and I'm thinking, some of you won't even know what I'm talking about here, but I had a little portable record player. Yeah. And when I think about it now, it's like about this big. It was the coolest thing. I loved it. Got it when I was like 17 something. Took it there, took magazines, comic books. Sean's telling me what to do here, right? And put them in my room. I hung up candles, and people said, you're crazy, they'll wreck it. And I said, so let them. They didn't wreck it. That's where those kids hung out after school. We taught them how to jive, because I had these I'm a big Elvis fan, right? So I had all these Elvis, and they had fun. And you know what happened? These kids, every Sunday evening, they would run, because we worked 7 days on, 7 days off. So you know what happens in shift change when new people come in? So Sunday night was a crazy time. They all ran off to Kelowna, whatever. And after a couple of months, they stopped running because we had things for them to do. We put on little parties on Sundays, so they had things to do. So one time there was about 5 of them up on the hill waiting to run away, and we're setting things up. And I went out and I said, you guys running or coming? And they went, well, I don't know. I said, well, you can run if you want to. We're staying here. We're hanging out. We're having some fun. When you get to Kelowna, we'll call the police and they'll bring you back. It's all good, because I'm not chasing you down. Sorry, I'm busy. They stopped running, right? Because they didn't need to run from us anymore, right? So I think the biggest thing I learned from there, again, is like not things you don't do, but how important it is to show them that you trust them. And yeah, I know you're gonna get burnt. We've been burnt lots, but we set up trusting situations being thoughtful about it later when we find our brains, right? But when we're first in, well, for me, it was like, let's just go with the heart and just love the hell out of them, and we'll see what happens next, right? But that was a huge lesson. Unfortunately, I was only there for 6 months. The government came in and said, we're shutting you down. You need to find homes for all these kids. It was awful. And one little boy who lived in my cabin, who I fell in love with, had been there. His story was probably one of the worst I'd ever heard, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. But he was 14 years old, and he was going to be sent back to an institution in Vancouver. where he'd lived already, and anyway, he'd been in this camp for 4 years. It was his home. Loved the Okanagan. It was peaceful for him. One of probably the only peaceful places he'd ever found. So I advocated for him. And unfortunately, at that time, there were no foster homes, there were no group homes, there was really nothing residential, no support for these kids in the Okanagan, and they almost all went back to institutions. But I know for a fact, one of our little native boys, he ended up living in the ditches of the Okanagan Valley. That's where he stayed, because they had nowhere for him to go. So I advocated for Kelly, and I think the government just got sick of me, talking about it. And in this meeting, I have to tell you, so we walked into this boardroom, and there was about 15 people sitting around, and I'm with him, and he walked in, and he went, "Fuck me." And I went, "Me too," I was like, holy, okay, intimidating, oh my God. And he said, "Why do you want this, what do you want?" And I said, "I want a safe place for this kid." And they were so tired of me, and they finally said, "If you want a safe place for him, take him yourself." So I did. So I'm 24 years old, he's 14. We find this rundown trailer full of spiders, and we lived with mice. Got to be good friends with all the little mice, as long as they weren't too big. I forgot to tell you about the rat, but that's okay. Okay, I'll tell you about the rat, just because. So that big storage room with all of the art supplies and everything, I'm so excited, and I go in there, and I'm going, "Oh my God, look at this stuff. Holy shit," and I just screamed, and this rat, honest to God, I am not exaggerating. And they came in and rescued me. They killed it. And I went, "I don't want to watch." And they said, "It's okay. We'll go check the room out every time before you come in. We'll make sure there's no rats." Mice, I'm good with mice after living with them for many, many months. But Kelly and I started, so there was nothing for him. He couldn't go to school. This kid was totally illiterate. He couldn't read, couldn't write. He wet his bed every night because he had the worst nightmares. Because where this kid came from, they found him when he was 7 years old in the woods north of Vancouver, starving. He saw his grandfather, blow his dad's brains out with a shotgun right in front of him. He used to steal food to feed his brothers and sisters. His sister was kept in a cage and poked with a stick. She ended up in a mental health institution, not surprising, and a lot of those kids did die. They found Kelly when he was 7. They put him into an institution and filled him and started giving him drugs because they did not know what else to do with him. Because you can understand that kind of crazy behavior, right? And then if you can't read and they put you in school, and then you act out. So I thought, I'm going to teach this kid how to read, how to write. The only program I could find for him there was with inmates who were on parole, right, in a workshop. But the kid loved cars, stole mine a few times. Yeah. I almost got arrested one time because I got stopped and there was a warrant out for my arrest, because apparently he had run my car down the street and almost, thank God he didn't, ran over a woman and her child in a crosswalk. And I didn't even know that had happened because I was taking a bit of a break from him at the time, and smart kid, got a copy of my key, made a copy, so when I went on a holiday. And he was 14 and a half, and so by that time, the people looking after him left him alone a lot, which they shouldn't have, but that's when he had his chance to take the car and go for little joy rides. And thank God it was just a little Pinto, didn't go very fast, but he ruined it, really. But I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I just didn't know. All I knew is that I cared about this boy and I wanted to help him. So I tried to teach him how to read and write. He had this head of amazing red hair, right? And so this is how he washed. He'd go into the bathroom, shut the door, turn the shower on, la 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 la, and then he'd come out and I'd go, "Kelly, you're not even wet." "Well, I dry really fast." Said, "Okay, well, and I started getting him to the point where I could wash his hair in the sink in the kitchen, and he loved it. And when I think about it now, I'm sure it was all about that touch, you know, and that comforting. But I just, you know, and then we dry it and I go, look at your hair, it's so awesome. Doesn't it feel good? You know, don't you want the rest of you to feel a little bit better? Because we had to go to the laundromat every day, every morning, to change his sheets, right? Because he literally did wet his bed every night. And I would hear him sometimes screaming and not know how to comfort him other than to just sit with him and rub his back, right? Which now we're told a lot of times you shouldn't do that. I say do it anyway, right? Because they need that comfort. They need that touch so bad. So anyway, long story short, 8 months, I end up in the hospital with an abscess on my stomach, and I'm done. He wore me out completely, and it was mainly because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I mean, how do you work with a kid like that when you don't have any knowledge of what's going on? So, but I have to tell you this, and if you are supervisors working out there with people and you see people struggling, still working a lot from the heart and not from the head, give them an opportunity, because this social worker knew I was done 2 months before I was done, but he let me figure it out. And when I'm in the hospital and I'm crying and I'm thinking, I can't do this anymore, and I sat with him and he said, I knew you couldn't do it anymore 2 months ago, but I don't want you leaving here like thinking you're a failure, because you're not a failure. You tried with this boy. You know, you tried to do what you could do, and you did the best you could. And guess what? You gave him a little love. So, and you know, I still see him. He spent most of his life in prison, but when we do see him, it's really, he talks about the camp and living with me as a time in his life when somebody actually did care about him. But I needed to go home. I was tired and I was depressed, and I was like, well, shit then. What happened to my dream? Was I ready to give up? No, I was not ready to give up. So I went home, and here's the next thing I learned is, if you want to do something and with passion, and I know you all have passion, don't let somebody tell you can't, right? Because you can do anything you set your mind to do, okay? So I went home and I made connections. I volunteered at the detention center. I worked with social workers, taking kids for trips, and did a lot of really stupid things of doing that, because I got sucked in a lot, but that's okay. Because every time you make a mistake, you learn from it. And you remember, hopefully, not to do it again, or at least not to the same extent, right? But what I learned was that I needed to know more, and I still wanted that safe house. So in 1977, I opened a foster home for 4 adolescent girls. Now, the biggest mistake I made was telling the foster parent association or the placement committee when they asked me, so what kind of kids do you like? I like them all. That was a mistake. There's one thing to work with kids. There's another thing to live with them 24/7, right? So I got kids who needed to be literally in the psych ward, needed to be watched 24/7. And then, because I'm still working from my heart, they would bring their friends home. Oh, my friend's dad just beat the shit out of her. Can she stay? Can my other friend stay? It's like, okay, this is becoming a little drop-in center here. The frustrating part is I was not getting a lot of support, right? And I'll tell you what was happening in Alberta in those days was no accountability on the department's part. People were working with kids who should have never been working with kids. And I'll tell you, I could have been locking those girls in the basement and tying them with chairs, and nobody would have given a damn, right? But things would change. Things would change drastically. Okay, so the 2 people that became huge advocates for me were 2 detectives. I called them Starsky and Hutch. And for those of you who are old enough to know who Starsky and Hutch was, you'll get that, right? Their names were similar to that. They brought beds for me. We cleaned up this house. We did all these kinds of things. But as time went on, things weren't working. Things were falling apart. I'm falling apart. There's some structure. There's something missing for me, right? And so one night, I'm a football fan, Stampeders, yay, go Stamps. There was a football game, it's like, and I need to tell you that I did not have any respite care, right? So I was there 24/7 for a long time. And when I finally did get somebody to come in, I would come home and the place was crazy, and I'm going, what the hell's going on? And this person thought I was mean because I made them do chores and clean up after themselves. And so she literally phoned them on Friday and said, is it okay if I show up now? And they're like, no, because we're still partying. They were doing drugs and all kinds of, it was crazy. So I'd come home from a weekend and go, what the hell? And they were out of control, and they were mad at me, and I could not figure that out. But anyways, learning. I phoned, so I called Starsky and Hutch, and I said, there's going to be trouble in River City tonight, and I'm going to the game. Would you do me a favor and stop over and just see, because I knew. And the house was downtown Calgary on 6th Avenue, and there was the biker, the bike crew across the street, and all these big houses filled with young men who were all doing drugs and partying and carrying on. And do you think they loved having a house with four adolescent girls? Oh yeah. So there was a lot of challenge keeping them home and helping. And anyways, I went to the game. I came home. Starsky and Hutch are sitting in the living room. It's really quiet. I'm like, oh. They said, just come in and have a coffee. I said, what happened? Well, you were right. There was trouble in River City. Got here, and somebody had put their fist through. I went through a lot of bathroom mirrors. Put their fist through the mirror. They'd gotten alcohol from wherever. They were all drunk. They were fighting. They were hurting each other, and they were crazy. So these two brilliant men took them outside, got them gathered up, took them outside, stood with them on the street, on the main sidewalk, and then arrested them all for being drunk and disorderly in a public place, and took them to the detention center. They said, you're good for a couple of days. And I said, I'm not sure I'm good at all. This is crazy. And you know what? I even called the crisis line one time needing some help, and you know what they told me? You should find another career. I was like, that's really helpful, thanks, fuck you, and he wrote me up. I was like, yeah, so I got a little black mark on my foster parent file, right? So I told the crisis worker to fuck off and like whatever. But I was done, and so I had another meltdown. I had another breakdown. Friend lent me a car. I drove to the Okanagan, and I cried for 2 weeks. And it's like, what the hell? What am I doing? Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? I don't know. So I came home, and the good witch, Heather, sat with me. She was my good friend, but she also became my foster care worker. And we sat down, and she said, Marlene, or Dorothy, I don't know, some days I'm very confused. She said, you need to find the balance between your head and your heart. And I looked at her and I said, I don't understand what you mean. What are you talking about, right? So, the ability to think, technical expertise, experience, training, knowledge, and lifelong learning, right? So, we talked, right? And I asked her what she meant and some details, and she just said, what do you need? And I said, I'd like a paycheck. That would be good. You know, the first 9 months, I never got paid. Right? I got money to provide a home, so, you know, rent and food and stuff, but I never actually had a salary. And then she went, what? Yeah. So I was excited that I was going to get paid. And I said, I think I need a psychologist. And she's like, oh, that's not a problem. We can get psychologists for the girls. I said, oh, no. I need a psychologist for me. I need somebody, you know, your friends are great, your family's great, they support you. They don't know what the hell you're doing. They really don't know what you're doing. They don't understand a lot about what you're doing. So at least mine didn't. I mean, they loved me, but they thought I was nuts. I got this wonderful psychologist that I went to see every Friday. And you know, people say that admitting that you have a problem is weakness. Mm-mm. It's a strength. Because you're human beings, I hate to remind you, you are human beings, and so you have weaknesses. And when we have weaknesses, we need to get help. And he was amazing, because I go there every Friday morning and just go, bah, and he'd just smile and listen. He didn't say much. But when he said something to me, it was important. But what he did more than anything else for me was he encouraged me, and he reminded me that I was doing a good thing. But like, do I freak out when they don't hang their wet towels up? Let's find some balance here, right? Routine is important, but let's pick our battles, right? He helped me to understand that. But what I also did was I joined the Foster Care Association so that I could get some knowledge. The Foster Parent Association, I would go and listen to these people talking, and I'm going, wow, that's cool. I like that. I started reading books. I started to get some knowledge on what it was I was doing. You also need to understand at that time, right? The words sexual abuse were not spoken out loud. So I can tell you that probably I know for a fact, 90% of the girls who came to live with me had been sexually abused in some manner, right? But we didn't say those words out loud. We didn't talk about that. So what did I know about the behaviors that arise from abuse? Nothing. So that's what I started to learn. You know what I love about being here, and have any of you been able to see an iceberg? We're being told that they're up north still, right? I really want to see an iceberg. Because do you know the iceberg metaphor? You've probably heard it. Some of you have heard it. I know Emily's heard it, right? Well, our kids that we work with are like the iceberg. We only see 10%. It's the 90% we don't see. But it's the 90% we have to pay attention to, because that's what drives their behavior. And if we just continue to respond to the behavior, we are not getting to the root of what where their pain is. And I love it when in the last few years the language has changed to pain behavior, because that's what it is. It's pain that drives the behavior. But if we keep consequencing these kids because of their crazy behavior and don't learn how to really listen to them, then we're in trouble, right? We're in trouble. So I have to tell you that as much as you need knowledge, and never mind. I'll just carry on. You need to go to school, you need your education, you need your training, you need all of those things. But the other thing that I hope you will always remember is that you also have this instinct, this gut. And when you really listen to kids, your gut will kick in when you're really listening. One of the most impactful situations that I will never, ever forget was working with this young woman. So she's 17 and a half years old. Her incest all her life. Nobody believed her. She ran away. Her parents were literally lived in the hills, in the back hills somewhere in the United States. And she would run away, and they would send her back, and she would run away. And anyways, she ended up coming to me when she was about 17 and a half. And she was very typical of your young ladies who have been sexually abused. So she was a little bit heavy, but wore big clothes, right? All the textile things and the big things and the hat and the short hair. And it's like, don't touch me, don't look at me, right? Because I'm not touchable. I'm not lovable. And tough, right? They're tough. You need to learn how to get protective things for your shoulders, right? Because sometimes it's just like, hi, how's it going? Because they don't know how to touch you in a comfortable way, and that's what we have to teach them. This young lady carried around a picture of her little sister, right? Her little sister, who was 5. And it was tattered and torn, and she always talked about her little sister. So I went out one night to a concert, and I came home, and so there were the four girls that were living there now, and she had put her fist through the mirror in the bathroom and tried to kill herself, and they had her in the corner in the kitchen table, just keeping her safe and keeping her there till I got home because they didn't know what the hell else to do, right? I was on a cast at that time because I'd torn my knee, and I had a bottle of pain drugs, which I discovered were gone. So she had taken all those pain drugs, and she was, and all she was saying was just, get the fuck out of my face, I'm gonna kill myself, I'm done, I'm done, I'm done. So I took her to the hospital. She told 3 different doctors she was gonna kill herself that night, didn't matter how, she'd find a way. And they looked at me and said, sorry, can't help you, take her home. I really, come on. So I took her home, and I blocked the door because she's trying to get out, and she's throwing things at me, and I'm going, oh crap, right? Because she's pretty strong. I just said, you're not going anywhere over my dead body, you are not going anywhere, right? So she ran upstairs, completely trashed her room, like just everything, broke everything. I never let them have mirrors in their rooms, thank goodness, right? Because at least there wasn't that for her to use. And I called the police, and then I got some action. Holy cow, the police, the fire department, and paramedics, everybody's there, right? And when they got there, she was curled up in a fetal position underneath all the blankets on the bed that she had tipped over, and just laying there. And they said, well, she seems okay now, so just keep her. They would not take her to the hospital. I'm like, oh my God. So for the next 3 days, I sat with her on the floor with this stupid cast on, just listening to stories. She's holding this picture. And I don't know to this day why I said what I said, but I looked at the picture, I looked at her, I kept hearing her messages, and I looked at it and I just said, she's not your sister, is she? She's your daughter. And you know, in that moment, and I've seen it happen before, but it was the first time, it was like the weight of the world came off this young lady, that somebody finally knew her secret, right? Somebody knew her pain. This little girl was just turning 5, and that was how old she was when her dad started incesting her. And because they lived out in the bush somewhere, when she had this baby, they just took her to the hospital, to this local place, and the mom was named as the mom and the dad, so they just raised her as their own. And that was her pain, and that was the beginning of her finding some relief. I don't know how many kids have said to you in your work, I have a secret. Ever told you that? They do have secrets. They have pain secrets, right? I sat with her for 3 days more. We just literally sat. I mean, the other girls were wonderful through this period because they understood that this was a kid who needed my attention more than they did at the time. And these other 3 girls who were living with me at the time are my daughters because they have been with me in my life ever since then. They're all turning 52 this year. Like, cool. Anyway, after she calmed down and we were able to talk through some of her pain, she came down one day and she said, I'm going home. I'm going to kill the bastard. And I just looked at her and I'm thinking, I'd do the same. I would feel the same. I wouldn't do the same. But I understood that. I totally understood that. She left because she was old enough to leave the system if she wanted to. She went home. 6 months later, she's at the door, come back for a visit. How are you? She says, I'm good. You know, I went home and I realized that I didn't want to spend the rest of my life in jail because of that son of a bitch, and there was nothing I could do to change it, but there's something I could do with my own life. So she joined the Conklin shows and travels with the carnival, probably still is, and she'd probably be just one of your awesome carnies, right? Because that's the kind of personality she had. But she went home and to her, I said, is this resolved for you? She said, as much as it possibly can be. Because is it ever really resolved? I don't think so. But some of her pain was gone, and when we reduce these kids' pain, we make it easier for them to live, right? Without it being so incredibly hard, right? And that's the piece that makes me feel good. If I can ease the pain of somebody, then that is absolutely what I think we're here for, right? So education is important. Training is huge, right? And conferences are wonderful. But don't forget that you also have just this innate feeling, because that comes from your heart, and that comes from you really listening to what they're saying to you, right? So the girls turned 18, and it was time to move on, and I was 30, and I'm like, now what the hell do I do? Like, what do I do with the rest of my life when I've already accomplished a goal? And so I became a social. It was really kind of cool having a 9-to-5 job, you know, and coming home and not having craziness going on around me all the time. And I liked it for a bit. I learned a lot. I actually gained a great deal of respect for social workers who are so limited in what they can do. And I was told, your job, 9 to 5. You don't visit families, you don't do this, you don't do that, you write reports. Went to court, and now I understood why they were always late for meetings. Because my very first day on the job, I swore I'm never going to be late for a meeting. I'm going to be so committed. First day, get called to court, and I'm there for 4 hours. And every meeting after that was late. And I apologized, and they just go, yeah, whatever. I said, no, really, I understood, right? And there's a lot of pressure. So I hated it, to tell you the truth, but I learned an awful lot. And one of the things that I believe is when you get stuck somewhere and you don't like it, you need to have the courage to change it, to make it happen in a different way, right? So courage to me is all about embracing change, taking risks, admitting mistakes, so I've done that a lot, and learning from them, listening to and learning from others, right? So we've been talking a little bit about learning from others and going to conferences, and I remember so many times going to conferences. The first time I ever listened to was 1991, Larry Brentro, when he first did his presentation on Reclaiming Youth at Risk, Our Hope for the Future, the Circle of Courage. Now, one of the things that used to happen for me when I'd go to conferences was that I'd get really excited, and sometimes a little too excited. So I had to learn how to kind of slow things down a little bit and take in what I thought was important. I've jumped ahead, so I'm trying to catch myself up here now, because I've missed a big piece, and so this isn't supposed to be what I'm talking about right now. So I'm just going to stop and carry on. I'll get to that piece, because there's a piece of this story that you haven't heard yet that you need to hear before I tell you about the conferences. So you're all with me on that, right? You're okay? Because sometimes it just happens that way. I'm going, shut up. Okay. Conviction, that's what courage is to me, is conviction, right? And mostly it's about passion. Okay? That's what courage is to me, is taking your passion and going with it. You ever read the book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway? No? You should read it. It's a great book. It's also a very good book for us to read and share with our kids, right? Because our kids are afraid, right? Because pain sometimes does that to you, makes you afraid of trusting, makes you afraid of all kinds of things. But Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway is a really good book, okay? So, 1982, big changes in Alberta, lots of money. Let's deinstitutionalize these kids and open up group homes. So I was really unhappy, and anyways, got a contract with two of my friends to open up a 6-bed group home for adolescents, 3 girls, 3 boys. Thought it was time for a mix. You ever worked with just girls? It's fun, isn't it? No. You need to bring a few boys in there for, well, you know, that makes it a little bit more interesting too in certain ways, but yeah, it's an interesting dynamic that we're not going to get into, right? So 1982, 2 of my friends and I opened a 6-bed group home, because that's the passion for me, right? Is the other 23 hours, the living with them, working with them, being with them in their environment, right? But also understanding, so the first thing is like, so you need to write a policy manual. What the hell's that? I don't know what a policy manual is. Oh, I guess I better go back to school. But that's where more training came in and more education, and I was so lucky, so very lucky to be a part of an association in Alberta. We were at a meeting and somebody was passing out this pamphlet about a master's in child and youth care administration from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And I was so excited, and I'm going, oh my God, look. Because I was not a big believer in theory, and I went, yeah, who needs theory when you're working the front lines? Like, you know, give me a break. And I was so excited to go to school. And somebody said to me, why the hell would you want to do that? You got your own group home. And I said, you know what? I don't want to be running around chasing adolescents when I'm 50. But I also know that I have so much more to learn. I have so much more that needs to come into my brain. And you know what going back to school did? It reaffirmed that there were some things I knew and totally showed me there are things I didn't, right? One of the things I strongly believe is that humility does not belong in this business, right? People who think they know everything in this business should not be working in this business, because you never will know everything, because these are human beings, and they all come from similar but different places, because their experiences are all different. And I'm sure you've all had that experience. Well, God, that worked so great for this kid. Why isn't it working for this one? Because there's something else you need to know about this kid to make it work for him or for her, right? So the education. Okay, so conferences. So I go to conferences and I'm all excited because I know so much more now, right? And I bring it back and I throw it at my staff and they just freak out. And they go, whoa, right? Change is good, but do it slowly, right? When you bring in a new concept, don't throw it at people. Teach them about it, right? So this is what I learned, and I love this concept and the circle of courage, and we put it up in the house, and we started to understand, and I started to teach it to them, just like Larry Brentro, taught it to me, and it became something that is the base of our program at Mount Royal, because the circle of courage absolutely works. And I'm going to assume that you're going to be taking home some ideas from this conference and some thoughts, and even just from hanging out and having a little wine with each other. You interact and you learn something new. Be gentle with your staff when you take it back and introduce them to new concepts gently, right? Because they don't like, well, they're human, right? So it's like, but here's another thing that I really think is important, and when we teach our students, one of the things that I think we should stop accepting as being okay is when somebody asks us the question, why are you doing it that way? And the answer is, because that's the way we've always done it. Please don't accept that. That's not an answer, right? I want to know why you're doing what you're doing that way. And if they can't tell you why, then maybe they've forgotten why. And maybe they need to go and re-examine that a little bit, right? So conferences, books, all the books out there that you've been looking at, all the things that we need to help us with our conviction to serve these kids that we work with. So you come with a heart You need to find the balance in your head, and you need to have the courage to keep carrying. But what I also believe is when you find that balance, you don't burn out. Like I burnt twice, but I don't burn anymore. Because when I know that I'm not okay, I take a break. And I go to, I golf and I curl and I drink wine. And I golf and I curl and I drink wine. And then I drink more wine. No, I'm just kidding. Well, actually, people would tell you, yes, I do. And you got to take care of yourselves. You all know that. And I really do know for a fact that when you find the balance, because you can never stop caring. You can't stop the caring. If you stop the caring, you're done, right? So when you combine it with both, then you're doing okay. Because heart, head, and courage, when you combine them, you and the child and youth care community will lead those in need down the yellow brick road to lives of love, security, and safety. One of the powerful pioneers, one of the elders that's in the book that you guys all got, Janusz Korczak. I think I always say it wrong, but that's why I've been saying it for years. A truly amazing man. If you don't know about him, you should read about him. He is a true champion. He was a true champion for children. And I'll just tell you briefly, he was a doctor in Poland during the Second World War, and he ran an orphanage in the Polish ghetto, Jewish Polish ghetto. And when it was time for them to move those children out and into the showers in Treblinka, he had an opportunity to be saved because the Germans said, "You're a doctor, we need you." And he said, "No, my children need me." And this most amazing picture of him walking down beside the trains, to get on the trains, to walk with his children, and walked into the gas chambers and died with them. His words, he's written beautiful books. His words just capture, I think, what so many of us believe. And one of my absolute favorite quotes from him is this one. It says, "What a powerful effect on the sad life of a child would be the memory of that person, perhaps the only one, who showed kindness, understanding, and respect in a world where cruelty had become the norm. The child's future life and sense of himself could take a different course, knowing there was one person who would not fail him." So I would like it now, if you would just think about the kids you work with, the people you encounter every day, and think about the fact that even though you can't change them, change all of their lives, every single moment you are with them is significant in them finding somebody who genuinely cares. So I want you to just relax for a minute and imagine. Imagine this. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being who you are. Thank you for taking care of our children and youth. Have an awesome rest of the day, and we'll see you at the party.